What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the stack. Welcome back if you've been here before. I'm neonmushroom, and today we've got some EDH Commander gameplay for you guys. Nothing spectacular. I think it's all players you've seen before and mostly decks you've seen before as well, but we wanted to do another normal EDH gameplay video before we get into the Strixhaven stuff, which is coming very soon. A lot of it's been recorded. That said, that's everything you should need to know, so let's go ahead and take a look at who's playing, what they decided to play, what opening hands they decided to keep, in addition to our normal upkeep stuff.
As always, if you like this show or any of our other shows on YouTube, liking, sharing, and subscribing helps us out immensely. If you like our content and don't mind that extra mile, you can always support us over on Patreon, over at patreon.com/mtgthestack.
Just like you, observer will.
Comment down below any of your thoughts and feelings, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Okay, first up we've got me, and I'll be playing my Gavi Nest Warden build, and this is a Cycling Matters deck that kind of wants to work like a Rube Goldberg machine. I want to assemble some combo, usually involving an escape protocol, to draw my whole deck multiple times, killing my opponents in the process. I'll be keeping a 7-card hand, including Desert of the True, Wooded Foothills, Blasted Landscape, an Ancient Tomb, Sulphur Falls, Teferi Time Raveler, and an Enlightened Tutor. Next up, we have Calvin playing a very straightforward Animar Soul of Elements build, and this deck is going to be built to play Animar very early, hopefully by turn 2 using a mana dork, and then play a few very efficient creatures like other mana dorks to keep blowing up Animar in order to overwhelm us in the late game by dropping bomb after bomb for very cheap thanks to Animar's static ability. Calvin was also lucky enough to keep a 7-card hand, including Steam Vents, Flooded Strand, Rootbound Crag, Worldly Tutor, a lot more elves, Rhythm of the Wild, and a Lifeblood Hydra. Next up, we have Guy Scott playing a deck submitted by one of our patrons. Special shout out to you, Ryan Bauer. This is going to be a Karametra stax build that wants to use the early game to slow everyone down using various stax pieces and win with something like a Knowledge Pool Draneth Magistrate lock. Guy has also opted to keep a 7-card hand, including Vryn Wingmare, Collector Oof, a Null Rod, 2 Snow-Covered Forests, a Verdant Catacombs, and a Windswept Heath. Last but certainly not least, we have Max returning, and he's bringing his Jhoira Weatherlight Captain build. This is going to be a very straightforward Jhoira build that wants to use Jhoira's static ability to draw as many cards as possible, and eventually establish some type of an infinite loop with Pyrite Spellbomb, or maybe even just win the game straight away with an Oracle of Thassa. Max is the last of us lucky enough to keep a 7-card hand, and he keeps a Serum Visions, a Thirst for Knowledge, Ethereum Sculptor, a Jeweled Lotus, Mox Amber, Island, and a Mountain.
Based on the last game that was recorded, I let Calvin have the power of choice once, and what happens?
Calvin got Blood Moon.
You got
cast
Blood
one
Moon.
spell.
Yeah, that's right. Here you go, guy.
game.
Here you go, Calvin. That one's for you.
Thanks.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Flip. Boom.
Wow.
Oh, no.
Alright, I won card game, so I'll start by drawing a card for turn, and then I'm going to go ahead and play Wooded Foothills and pass to Calvin. We'll draw his card for turn, drop a Flooded Strand, he's immediately going to fetch and drop down to 39, and he's going to go grab a copy of Tropical Island. Then he's going to tap that for green, deploy Lemore Elves, and pass the turn to Guy. Guy's going to untap, upkeep, draw for turn, slam down a Temple Garden, pass the turn to Max, who is going to play a basic island as his land for turn, and then he's going to drop a Jeweled Lotus. Then he's going to immediately crack it for 3 red mana and play Jhoira Weatherlight Captain. After that, he'll play Mox Amber. I have a response to Jhoira's trigger while it's on the stack. I'll fetch, going to 39, and I will shock in a Sacred Foundry, dropping to 37, and I'll tap it for white to cast Enlightened Tutor. I'll search my library for a Chrome Mox. I'm going to put that on top of my library, and then I'm going to allow all of Max's triggers to resolve, starting with Jhoira, so he'll draw a card. His Mox Amber's on, so he'll tap it for blue to play Serum Visions. He'll draw a card, then he's going to scry 2 and decide to put 1 on the bottom and 1 back on the top and pass to me. I'll untap, I'm going to draw the Chrome Mox, play a Sulphur Falls, then I'll play Chrome Mox, imprinting Sweltering Sun so it taps for red. I'll tap for 3 and drop Teferi Time Raveler.
Calvin, if I bounce that Jhoira, you gonna leave this sticking around?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
After a little politicking with Calvin, I'm going to use my Teferi to bounce Jhoira, undoing Max's tempo advantage, and pass the turn to Calvin. He'll draw and play a Rootbound Crag, then he's going to tap for 3 and play Rhythm of the Wild. With nothing else, he's going to ship the turn to Guy, who will untap, draw his card for turn, and then he's going to play a Snow-Covered Forest. After that, he's going to tap for 2 and play Collector Oof, putting Max even further behind. He'll pass to Max, who will untap and draw. Max is going to drop a basic mountain as his land for turn, and then tap for 2 to cast Ethereum Sculptor. He has no further action, so he passes to me. I'll draw my card, and my Chrome Mox is off, so I'm just going to drop Arid Mesa, tick up my Teferi, Then I'll tap for 2, and I'm going to play Tectonic Reformation. With nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and pass the turn back to Calvin, who will untap, draw his card for turn, and play City of Brass. He's going to make a little mistake here. He taps for 3, but he forgets to take 1 off of the City of Brass. He's going to use it to cast Animar, Soul of Elements, and give it a +1/+1 counter, thanks to Rhythm of the Wild. That way he can play Sakura Tribe Elder for 1 mana. This triggers Animar, it goes up to 2. He gives the Sakura Tribe Elder haste, and attacks my Teferi for 1, dropping my Teferi to 1 loyalty. And then we'll pass the turn to Guy, where he'll draw and play a Windswept Heath as his land for turn. He's going to fetch, dropping down to 39 life, and then he's going to get a Snow-Covered Plains and put it into play. After this point, he'll tap for 3 mana, and he's going to drop a Sanctum Prelate, and he's going to pick a number. In this case, he chooses 1. After that, he'll head to combat, and he will finish off my Teferi, and just pass the turn to Max, who will draw his card for turn, and then he's going to drop a Bloodstained Mire. Max is going to immediately fetch with the Bloodstained Mire. He's going to search his library for a Steam Vents and shock it into play. After that, he has no further actions, so at his end step, I'm going to try to fetch. Calvin has a response. He's just going to sack his Sakura Tribe Elder to get a forest into play tapped. Then my fetch works, so I'll drop down to 36, and I'm going to shock in a Steam Vents. After this point, I'm going to tap my Steam Vents for a red mana, and I'm going to cycle my Blasted Landscape for 1 red thanks to the Tectonic Reformation, allowing me to draw a card. After that, we'll move back to my turn for the 4th cycle of turns. I'll untap, I'm going to drop an Ancient Tomb, then I'm going to tap for 5 and lose 2 life, and I'm going to cast Starstorm, where X equals 3. This is going to deal 3 damage to each creature, effectively wiping the board, and with nothing else, I'll just pass the turn back to Calvin, where he'll untap, draw, and play his own Bloodstained Mire. After that, Calvin's going to tap for 4 mana, losing 1 to a City of Brass, and he's going to drop a Beast Whisperer. When he does that, that triggers Rhythm of the Wild, so he's going to choose to put a +1/+1 counter on the Beast Whisperer, and with nothing else, he'll pass the turn to Guy, who untaps, draws, and plays a Snow-Covered Forest as his land for turn. Then Guy's going to tap for 2 and attempt to cast Null Rod, but Max has a response. He's going to tap for 3 and cast Thirst for Knowledge, and I have a response to this as well. I'm going to tap for 1 red and cycle Hengegate Pathway thanks to my Tectonic Reformation, draw a card, and pass priority back to Max, where he'll resolve the Thirst for Knowledge, and he'll discard an Isochron Scepter. Then he's going to cast Force of Will, discarding a Future Sight to it to counter the Null Rod. After this, the whole stack's going to resolve, and Guy's going to pass the turn to Max, where he'll untap and draw his card for turn. Then he's going to tap for 1 blue, and he's going to cast Preordain. He's going to start by scrying 2, decides he doesn't want either of them, puts them on the bottom, then he's going to draw a card, in this case it's Spellskite. He'll drop an island as his land for turn, and then I'll just pass the turn right back to me. I'll draw my card for turn, then I'm going to tap for 5, losing 2 to my Ancient Tomb, to play Gavi, Nest Warden. After that, I'll cycle Desert of the True for free, which is going to trigger Gavi. I'm going to make a 2/2 Dinosaur Cat and draw a card. With nothing else, I'll just try to pass the turn to Calvin, but he's going to make a illegal play here and fetch for a Breeding Pool with a Bloodstained Mire. Most of you astute viewers probably see that that is neither a swamp nor a mountain. Then he's going to play a Steam Vents, shocking it into play. After that point, he's going to tap for 5 mana and redeploy his commander, Animar, Soul of Elements. That's going to put 2 triggers under the stack, 1 from Rhythm of the Wild and 1 from Beast Whisperer. He'll draw a card to the Beast Whisperer, and he'll put a +1/+1 counter on his Animar, thanks to the Rhythm of the Wild. After that, I'll try to pass to Guy, but Guy's going to pull a Gavi move and cycle a Scattered Groves, then move to his turn. He'll untap, deploy a Snow-Covered Forest as his land for turn. Then he's going to tap for 3 mana, and he's going to drop a Rule of Law. After that, we'll pass to Max.
Rude.
I'm also afraid of you.
Fuck your ass.
Alright. Why would you be afraid of this?
Yeah, but
Too many.
why would you be afraid of Jhoira? Why is this your
Too many.
stupid thing to be afraid of? I just you win the game.
Max, I can feel how close you are to nutting.
He's
I can't.
He's just
But
staring.
before
yeah,
that.
but you were about to untap and win, weren't you? Yeah, look at that face.
No.
No, I wouldn't do that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Thanks to the Rule of Law, Max only gets 1 spell, so he's going to tap for 4 and cast his commander Jhoira, and just pass the turn to me, where I'll untap, draw, and go into combat. I'm going to attack Guy for 4, bringing him to 2 commander damage and 35 life. After this, I'm going to tap for 5 mana, losing 2 life to the Ancient Tomb, and I'll play Ahilmar's Archive, which resolves, so now my draws are all doubled. After that, I'll cycle Valiant Rescuer for free, triggering Gavi, making a 2/2 Dinosaur Cat, and I'll draw 2, thanks to my Archive. After that, Calvin's going to lose a life to the City of Brass, tapping it for green to cast Worldly Tutor, to go get a Consecrated Sphinx and put it on top of his library. Then he's going to untap, and he's going to draw that Consecrated Sphinx. He's going to straight away tap for enough mana to cast the Consecrated Sphinx. That puts a few triggers on the stack, but I do have a response to them. I'm going to cycle Countervailing Winds for free, drawing 2 cards, which triggers Gavi, so I'll make another Dinosaur Cat. Then I'm going to tap for 1 red mana, and I'm going to use Tectonic Reformation in order to cycle Spectator Seating. I'll draw 2 more cards thanks to the archive, and with nothing else, we'll allow the Consecrated Sphinx to resolve. Calvin draws a card off of the Beast Whisperer, and he's going to wind up triggering the Animar as well. He's going to give his Consecrated Sphinx haste with the Rhythm of the Wild, go to combat, and he's going to hit me in the face for 4, dropping me to 24. After that, we'll move to Guy's turn, where he'll draw his card for turn, triggering Consecrated Sphinx, allowing Calvin to draw 2 cards. Then Guy's going to play a Command Tower as his land for turn, and he's finally going to tap for 5 and cast his commander, Karametra, God of Harvests. I'm then going to cycle Neutralized for free. I'm going to draw 2 cards and make a Dino Cat, but Calvin is also going to be able to draw 4 cards thanks to that. Then Max is going to untap and draw his card for turn and play Inventor's Fair as his land for turn. Then he's going to cast Reshape, sacrificing the Mox Amber, and X will equal 4. He's going to search his library and get a Mystic Forge, putting it into play. After that, he'll look at the top card of his library and try to pass the turn to me, but in response, I will cycle Astral Drift, which has a trigger before I draw the cards. I'm going to exile his Consecrated Sphinx until the end of my turn, since I'm doing this on Max's end step. I'll then draw 2 cards and make a Dinosaur Cat off Gavi, and then I'm going to untap and draw my card for turn. In my first main phase, I'll tap for 2 and cast Containment Priest, meaning that Calvin's Consecrated Sphinx will not re-enter the battlefield. After that, I want to head into combat, and I'm going to turn 5 of my 2/2 sideways at Guy for a total of 10 damage. He has no legal blockers, so he's going to drop to 25. Then I'll play Marsh Flats, and I'm going to cycle Bloodstained Mire. I'll draw 2 cards, and then I'm going to make another Dino Cat, and after this point, I'm going to pass the turn back to Calvin. He will infinitely exile that Consecrated Sphinx, and untap, and draw his card for turn. Now Calvin's going to make what seems like a pretty innocent misplay. He taps for 2, losing 1 of the City Brass, to play Walking Ballista where X equals 2. It obviously should have just equaled 1. So that's going to give it 2 +1/+1 counters, because we messed that up. Trigger Animar, he's going to draw a card off Beast Whisperer, then Rhythm triggers and gives it another +1/+1 counter. Calvin's going to try to pass, but first I'll cycle my Triome, triggering the Archive and Gavi, making another Dino Cat. Then Calvin remembers he hasn't made a land drop, so he'll play his Forest, go to discard, and then he's going to pass the turn right back to Guy, who untaps and draws his card for turn. Then Guy's going to tap for 2 mana, and he's going to try to cast Kataki, War's Wage, but I'm fairly attached to my artifacts, so I'm going to go ahead and cycle Decree of Silence, countering the Kataki, and that also triggers the Archive. I'm going to draw 2 cards, and then Gavi's going to trigger eventually and make a Dino Cat, but we remember that after Guy gets his Arctic Tree Line off of the Karametra. After that point, Guy doesn't have any further action, so he tries to pass, but before he can, I'm going to float 2 thanks to my Ancient Tomb, losing 2 to cycle Reconnaissance Mission, and I will draw 2 cards to that. Then we'll move to Max's turn, where he'll draw his card for turn, try to pass to me, but first I'm going to cycle Drifting Meadow, drawing 2 and making another Dinosaur Cat. Then I'm going to tap my Steam Vents for red in order to cycle a Mountain, and that's going to draw me 2 more cards. After that point, I'm going to try to fetch with my Marsh Flats, losing a life, but Calvin decides this is a very good time to respond. He's going to use his Walking Ballista and take off one of the counters to shoot my Containment Priest for 1. That resolves, so he does it again, killing the Containment Priest. Then I'll resolve the Marsh Flats crack, I'll go ahead and get a Plains, then I'll untap and draw my card for turn. I'm going to drop Hall of Heliod's Generosity as my land for turn, then I'm going to count out some mana. I'm going to wind up tapping for just 2 to play Drannith Stinger. After that, I'm going to head into combat, and I'm going to swing at Guy for a grand total of 20 damage. He can't block any of it, so he drops to 5, and I'm going to try to pass the turn to Calvin, but before I can, he'll activate Walking Ballista, then I'll go to discard, and Calvin will untap and draw his card for turn. He'll deploy a basic island as his land for turn, then he's going to tap for 2 mana in order to cast Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. This is going to have some triggers going off, so he's going to draw a card thanks to his Beast Whisperer, and then the Animar is going to go ahead and get a counter. After this point, the Uro is going to actually enter the battlefield. This will allow Calvin to gain 3 life, draw an additional card, and then he's going to put a Sulphur Falls into play and sacrifice the Uro. Calvin then wants to try to pass the turn, but first I'm going to activate Hall of Heliod's Generosity, and I'm going to put Decree of Silence back on top of my library. Then I'm going to cycle Rescind for free, and when I do that, Calvin has a response. He's going to take off a counter to shoot the Stinger, and then once that resolves, he'll do it again to kill my Drannith Stinger. But it still saw me cycle a card, so each of my opponents will take 1 thanks to the cycle. Then I'll draw 2, and that's going to trigger Gavi, so I'm going to make another Dinosaur Cat. With no further actions, we're going to go ahead and move to Guy's turn, where he'll untap and draw his card for turn. Then he's going to tap for 3, and he's going to cast Vryn Wingmare. That's going to have him triggering his Karametra, so we'll search his library for a snow-covered forest in this case, and then he's going to try to pass, but before he can, I'll cycle Secluded Steppe. I'm going to draw 2 cards, and then I'm going to make another Dino Cat off of Gavi. After that, Max is going to tap for 4 mana to pay for the Vryn Wingmare in order to capsize Guy's Rule of Law. That's going to happen. Guy's going to put Rule of Law back in his hand. Then Max is going to untap, and he's going to draw his card for turn and look at the top card of his library. Then he's going to go ahead and play Chrome Mox, paying the extra off of Vern Wingmare, and he's going to draw a card before imprinting because it's a cast trigger, and he'll imprint a Flusterstorm underneath the Chrome Mox. He'll look at the top card again, and after that point, he's going to tap for 2 more mana, and he's going to try to cast Spellskite, which resolves and triggers Jhoira, so he's going to draw another card, and he'll play Academy Runes as his land for turn. Then he's going to look at the top card again and decide that he does not like what he sees, so he activates Mystic Forge, and he's going to put that card into exile. He'll lose a life, and then he's going to tap for 3, and then pay the extra for Vern Wingmare in order to cast Basalt Monolith off of the top, and draw a card to the Jhoira. Then he's going to tap his Basalt Monolith for 3, and he's going to cast Foundry Inspector off of the top, drawing to Jhoira, and he's out of steam, so he's going to try to pass. But first, I'm going to cycle Polluted Delta for free. That'll cause him to make a Dino Cat off of Gavi and draw 2 cards. And after that, I'm going to tap my Sacred Foundry for a red, and I'm going to cycle my Reliquary Tower, which is going to draw me another 2 cards. After that, I decide it's time to take my turn, so I'll untap, and then I'm going to draw my card for turn, tap for 2, losing 2 life, and then float 2 more, and I'll use 3 of it to cast Escape Protocol. Now that's on a stack. Calvin knows how my deck works, so he's going to tap for 3, and then 1 more for the Vern Wingmare, and he's going to try to Void Slime the Escape Protocol. I have a response. I'll cycle Decree of Silence, and I'll try to counter the Void Slime. Calvin taps for 2 more, and he's going to cast Veil of Summer. Now, the Veil of Summer is going to resolve, so it'll trigger because I did cast a blue spell that's going to wind up stopping my Decree of Silence from countering. He's going to draw a card off of the Veil, but I will still draw 2 cards off of my Decree of Silence. Then I'm going to make a Dino Cat because I drew my second card for turn. I'll tap for 2, and then I'll cast Dockside Extortionist. After a quick count, we realize it makes 7 treasures, so those will come into play, and then I'm going to use 1 of those treasures, and I'm going to cycle Holographic Illumination. With that cycle on the stack, I'm going to activate my Hall of Heliod's Generosity and put Escape Protocol back on top. Then I'll allow myself to draw 2 off of the Illumination cycle, and I'll get my Escape Protocol back. I'll pay 3 treasures to pay for the extra for Vern Wingmare and play my Escape Protocol. After that point, I need to head into combat and attack Guy with everything to kill him because I need that Vern Wingmare out of play to continue. Guy's out of the game, so in my second main phase, I'll pay 1 mana to play a Soul Ring, then I'll tap that Soul Ring for 2 mana, and I'm going to cycle Angel Song. I'll use my last treasure to use the Escape Protocol to blink Dockside Extortionist. When this happens, it leaves and comes back into play, and I'm going to make 6 treasures, and then I'll draw 2 cards off of the Angel Song. After that, we're going to start a little bit of a loop. I'm going to pay some treasures in order to be able to cycle Desert of the Fervent. That brings me down to 5, then I'll go down to 4 because I cycled a card, and I'm going to blink Dockside Extortionist, which will come back into play and bring me up to a total of 10 treasures. Then I'll repeat this loop, this time cycling an island, going down to 8 after I pay for the cycle, and pay for the blink on Dockside and make 6 more treasures and draw 2 more cards. After that, I'm going to take a break from the cycling and pay 3 treasures for a really cool enchantment. It's called Wild Research. This is going to resolve, so I'm going to pay some more treasures and activate my Wild Research and search my library for an enchantment. I'm going to get Impact Tremors, and I'm going to try to play it straight away, but then I'm going to be reminded that I have to discard a card at random first because that's how Wild Research works. So Guy's going to reset my treasures to where they originally were, and then Guy and Calvin are going to try really hard to snipe my Impact Tremors out of my hand. They're going to pick a card, and in this case it's going to be Archaeomancer that goes to the graveyard. Then I'll go with the original plan of paying 2 mana to play an Impact Tremors. After that, I'm going to return to the cycling plan and pay 2 mana to cycle clear, and I'm going to do the whole Dockside loop again. Except for this time, when I do the Dockside loop, Dockside's going to leave play and come back in, and Impact Tremors is going to see this, so both of my opponents will take 1 damage. Then I'll use some more treasures, and I'm going to play Savine's Reclamation. I'm going to go to my graveyard and grab a Drannith Stinger and put it into play, so now every time I do that loop, each of my opponents are going to take 2, and the Impact Tremors triggers when I play the Drannith Stinger. Then I'll cycle Miscalculation. I'm going to do the entire loop again. This time my Drannith Stinger is going to deal 1 to both of my opponents because I cycled, and the Dockside is going to trigger Impact Tremors, dealing 1 to both of my opponents. That's going to bring them to 30 and 31. Then I'll cycle Command Tower, repeating the entire loop, and after that I'll cycle a Plains, once again repeating that loop. After this point, I decide I'm going to pay 6 mana and play New Perspectives. That's going to trigger the Alhemerit's Archive, or it's a static I suppose. Either way, I'm going to draw 6 cards. Then I'll start cycling again, 1, 2, 3 lands, that's going to deal 6 to all of them. After this point, I don't need to keep going because I have a Decree of Justice, so I'll pay all of my mana into X, and that's going to make a ton of 1/1s, triggering Impact Tremors, and that's going to deal enough damage to kill all of my opponents, causing me to win the game. Alright, that was a long ass game, so let's try to get this wrap up going so you guys aren't here for like a half hour, which is what I suspect this video might end up being anyway, but we'll try to avoid it. Let's talk about how everyone's decks performed in no particular order, and the one that sticks out, I kind of like to start by talking about the dichotomy between what Guy was doing and what Max was doing. Max was playing probably the most powerful deck at the table, pound for pound. It's a Jhoira deck, it's very well tuned, but Guy was playing a Karametra stax deck, so we'll start with Guy. While he wasn't ever able to do anything meaningful enough to get him to his endgame, so he could start actually cleaning it up and maybe winning the game, he did the stax thing. I don't know if you can hear that, there's people riding motorcycles outside my house. Whatever, he did the stax thing, and a lot of these stax pieces lock Max's Jhoira deck right out of the game, which is really unfortunate for Max because he had the opener. He had land and the Jeweled Lotus, where they turn 1 Jhoira, and he even had the Mox Amber to boot. So if he hadn't been interacted with so much, and I did some stuff too, but it was less important, he probably could have come back into the game. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what Guy's deck was doing, even though it wasn't it never brought him to his endgame, he was never able to like win the game because of it, he shut Max down really hard. That's kind of all there is to say about Guy, and we kind of cleaned Max up in that same sentence at the same time. What I will say is Max did have a stretch at the end game with his Mystic Forge, but it was never good enough to get there. By the time he was able to like get the Rule of Law out of play, there was a Vern Wingmare. There was never a good time for him to come back into the game, unfortunately, and the game ended right after that turn. With that, I'd like to talk about Calvin, because he did exactly what he was supposed to. He had a Rhythm of the Wild. He was able to, drop that on turn 2 because he had the turn 1 mana dork. Guy kind of held down Calvin with his stax pieces as well. Calvin probably could have done a lot more if he was able to like get around the Rule of Law in the mid game, but he was never able to. And Calvin even got into a counter war in the late game with me that he won, but it never ended up mattering because I had Hall of Heliod's Generosity, which is quite a good card. So Calvin was never able to quite get there. Even if he had his combo, you couldn't do it for most of the game. There's this card, it's like some idol, it's a colorless thing. Hopefully there's an image on the screen. But it goes infinite with Animar, because you keep playing it and bouncing it to itself, making Animar infinitely big. He probably could use that to like take me out or something, but he didn't have it, and even if he did, he couldn't cast it. So we'll get to me. I didn't even do anything that spectacular. I just kind of sat there and profited off of what Guy was doing. My deck did its thing. It's kind of a slow deck. It's a bit of a Rube Goldberg machine, but I was able to slowly play out my pieces and eventually win the game. I ended up using Decree of the White Decree of Justice, but I could have gone infinite there. Wouldn't have made sense to. I could have won the game. Why would I go infinite when I didn't have to? But that's all there is to it. It was nothing spectacular. You guys have seen Gavi before. He saw it again this time. So there's that. That's all I have for you guys today. I see that I've been recording for 3 minutes and 13 seconds here at the end, so this video's got to be like 25 minutes. Stay tuned for Strixhaven stuff, that's going to be pretty fun. And stay tuned for any of you guys who wanted the mats. We've got the prototype mats in. You might be seeing them very, very soon, and if all goes well, they'll be available on the market for everybody. That's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.